In a quiet Montana town, 10-year-old Silas Brennan sat alone on the courthouse steps, clutching a worn photograph, the last image of his parents before the fire took them 6 months ago. Foster care had taught him that family was temporary, that promises dissolved like morning frost. But Silas remembered something his father once said: "The angels ride for their own." So when a convoy of Hell's Angels rolled through town for a memorial run, the boy did something no one expected. He walked straight up to their road captain, a scarred veteran named Garrett Thorne, and made an impossible request. "Be my family," Silas whispered, his voice barely audible over the rumbling engines. "Just for one day. My birthday's tomorrow. I'll be 11. I don't need presents. I just need people who keep their word." What began as a child's desperate plea became something far greater. Garrett saw in Silas's eyes the same hollowness he'd carried after Vietnam, the look of someone who'd learned too young that the world breaks promises. That night, Garrett made a decision that would ripple through the entire chapter. By dawn, 83 bikers stood ready, and what they planned for Silas's birthday would force a divided town to remember what family truly meant. This is the story of how one boy's courage reminded hardened men of their humanity, and how a community learned that redemption doesn't ask permission, it simply arrives on 2 wheels, carrying the weight of old promises and new beginnings. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across Bennett Street when Silas Brennan first approached the line of motorcycles parked outside Murphy's Diner. His sneakers, 2 sizes too big, donated by the church, scraped against gravel as he counted the bikes. 27, each one polished to mirror shine, chrome catching the dying light like fractured stars. If you value stories of courage and redemption, subscribe now, because what comes next will restore your faith in humanity. Inside the diner, Garrett Thorne sat in the corner booth, nursing black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. At 56, his face carried the roadmap of a hard life. Scar tissue from Kaysan curved along his left jaw, and his knuckles bore the permanent stain of engine grease no soap could fully erase. He'd ridden with the Angels for 32 years, served as road captain for 12. He knew the weight of brotherhood, the cost of loyalty. The boy appeared in his peripheral vision like a ghost, materializing from memory, small frame, dark hair that needed cutting, eyes too old for his face. Silas stood 3 feet from the booth, hands twisted in the hem of a threadbare jacket. "Sir?" The word came out cracked, uncertain. Garrett looked up. Around the diner, conversations dimmed. Murphy himself paused mid-pour, coffee pot frozen above a cup. Everyone in Bennett knew Silas Brennan, the orphan, the foster kid cycling through temporary homes. The boy who'd watched his parents' house burn from the school playground 6 months prior. "What do you need, son?" Silas pulled something from his pocket, a photograph, edges softened by countless touches. He placed it on the table between them. The image showed a man in his 30s, wearing a leather vest adorned with patches, one arm around a smiling woman, the other holding a much younger Silas. "That's my dad, Ezra Brennan. He rode with the charter in Billings before I was born. He told me stories about brotherhood, about how angels keep their word no matter what." Silas's voice strengthened slightly. He said family was the only promise that mattered. Garrett studied the photograph. He didn't recognize Ezra, but the patches were authentic. Billings charter, early 90s. The man had the look, scarred hands, steady eyes, the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned his place. "Your father was a brother." Garrett's tone shifted, no longer speaking to a child, but to the son of a fallen rider. "What brings you to me?" Silas's shoulders trembled, but his voice held steady. "Tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 11. I've been in 3 foster homes since the fire. Good people mostly, but they're not. They're not mine, you know. They smile and say the right things, but I can see it. They're waiting for me to leave or break something or give them a reason." Murphy set down the coffee pot. The cook stopped moving in the kitchen. The entire diner had gone silent, every ear straining. "I don't want presents or cake or anything normal," Silas continued, his words tumbling faster now. I want I need just one day where people act like I belong somewhere, where I'm not the problem or the charity case or the sad story everyone whispers about. He met Garrett's eyes directly, unflinching. Be my family for a day, just tomorrow. Ride with me, talk to me like I matter. Show me what Dad meant when he said brotherhood was forever. I know I'm asking the impossible. I know you don't owe me anything. But Dad said angels keep promises, and I'm betting everything that he was right. The silence stretched thin and taut. Outside, evening wind rattled the diner's windows. Someone's fork clinked against a plate, impossibly loud. Garrett picked up the photograph, studying Ezra's face, the man's hand protective on his son's shoulder, the pride unmistakable. He thought of his own daughter, lost to cancer at 12, the promises he'd been unable to keep. He thought of every brother who'd fallen, every debt still owed to men who could no longer collect. You got a place to stay tonight? Foster home on Maple Street, the Hendersons. They're fine. Garrett stood, his 6'3" frame unfolding like a mountain rising. He pulled his wallet, extracted a 20, left it on the table for Murphy. Go home. Pack a small bag, change of clothes, toothbrush, whatever you need. Be ready at dawn. He placed one calloused hand on Silas's shoulder, the gesture carrying weight beyond words. Tomorrow, you ride with family. Silas's eyes widened, disbelief and hope warring across his face. You mean it? A brother's word is iron, son. Your father knew that. Now you will too. As Silas turned to leave, Garrett called after him. Silas, one more thing. When an angel makes a promise, he doesn't do it halfway. Tomorrow won't just be one day. Tomorrow you'll understand what forever means. The boy disappeared into the gathering darkness, running now, his two big sneakers kicking up dust. Garrett pulled his phone from his vest pocket, began scrolling through contacts. He had calls to make, brothers to summon, a promise to keep that would require more than just showing up. Outside, the evening star appeared above the mountains, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled. Or perhaps it was only engines, already beginning their journey toward Bennett. Garrett stood outside Murphy's diner, phone pressed to his ear, watching Silas's silhouette disappear around the corner toward Maple Street. The boy moved with purpose now, no longer the hollow-eyed ghost who'd approached his booth. Hope, Garrett thought, was a dangerous gift. It required delivery. Cade, it's Thorne. I need the chapter mobilized by sunrise. On the other end, Cade Merrick, Sergeant-at-Arms for the Montana Charter, exhaled slowly. Background noise suggested he was in his garage, working late on some engine rebuild. Metal clanged against concrete. We talking emergency or ceremony? Both. Got a situation involving Ezra Brennan's kid. Silence. Then, Ezra from Billings. Thought he retired. Went straight. He did. House fire took him and his wife 6 months back. Boy's in foster care now. Just turned up asking for family. Garrett paused, choosing words carefully. Made me a request I can't refuse. Need every available rider ready to roll at dawn. Full colors, clean bikes and Cade. Make sure everyone understands this isn't a party run. This is about keeping faith with a fallen brother. How many you thinking? Garrett scanned the darkening street, calculating distances, logistics, what it would take to make tomorrow matter. Everyone within 300 miles who can swing it. Call the other charters, Wyoming, Idaho, even the Billings boys if they can make the ride overnight. Tell them it's about honoring Ezra's memory and making sure his son knows what brotherhood means. Christ, Thorne, you're talking 80, maybe 90 bikes. Exactly. Boy asked for family. I'm giving him the whole damn bloodline. Cade's laugh came rough and approving. What time? First light, 6 a.m. at the Maple Street intersection. And Cade, spread the word clean. No contraband. No attitude. Nothing that gives locals reason to complain. This town's already nervous about us. Tomorrow, we show them what the club actually stands for. Understood. I'll make the calls. Garrett ended the conversation, immediately dialing the next number. For the next 3 hours, he worked through his contact list like a general marshalling troops, road captains from Missoula, Bozeman, Billings, even the Wyoming Charter's president who owed him favors stretching back 2 decades. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Explanation, request, immediate agreement. The story of Silas's request spread through the Brotherhood like wildfire, carried on phone calls and text messages that lit up screens across 4 states. Brothers who'd planned lazy Sundays suddenly found themselves checking tire pressure, polishing chrome, packing overnight bags. Around 9 p.m., Garrett's phone rang, a number he didn't immediately recognize. "Thorne? Name's Vaughn Hendricks. I'm Silas's current foster parent." Garrett tensed. "Something wrong?" "Opposite, actually. Boy came home an hour ago, packed a small bag, told us he was spending tomorrow with family, said you'd arranged it, wanted to make sure that was legitimate before I let him out of our sight." "It's legitimate. I knew his father. Boy made me a promise I intend to keep." Vaughn's relief was audible. "Thank God. Silas has been through hell since the fire. Barely talks, doesn't make friends, acts like he's waiting for the next bad thing. Tonight's the first time I've seen him look hopeful about anything. Then we're on the same page. I'll have him back safely by nightfall tomorrow. You have my word." "Mr. Thorne, one more thing. Whatever you're planning, thank you. This kid needs something to believe in." After ending the call, Garrett walked to his bike, a 1998 Road King he'd rebuilt 3 times, each restoration a meditation on permanence and purpose. He ran his hand along the fuel tank, feeling the familiar contours, like reading Braille in the darkness. His own daughter, Iris, had been Silas's age when the leukemia diagnosis came. She'd asked for simple things toward the end, walks in the garden, stories about his riding days, promises that he'd remember her laughter. He'd kept every promise, except the one that mattered most, keeping her alive. Silas was offering him something rare, a chance to honor fatherhood, to make good on debts owed to time and memory and loss. By midnight, confirmation messages flooded his phone. Riders from Billings confirmed they'd roll at 2 a.m. to arrive by dawn. The Wyoming charter promised 15 bikes. Idaho pledged 8. Brothers who hadn't ridden in months dug bikes out of storage, changed oil in the dark, called employers to explain they'd miss Monday's shift. At 1:15 a.m., Cade sent a group message to the main channel. 83 confirmed. Rolling for Ezra's boy at sunrise. Brothers, this is what we're about. Family, loyalty, keeping promises that matter. Ride clean, ride proud. See you at dawn. Garrett set his alarm for 4:30, lay down on the couch in his club's common room, and closed his eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, he saw Silas's face, that mixture of desperation and courage. The way the boy had placed his father's photograph on the table, like presenting evidence in court. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and starlit. Across hundreds of miles, engines were being tested, gear was being packed, and men who'd seen too much hardness were preparing to show a child that some promises still held weight in a cynical world. By dawn, Bennett would wake to the sound of thunder that wasn't weather. The first motorcycle arrived at 5:43 a.m., its headlight cutting through pre-dawn darkness like a comet trailing thunder. Within minutes, Maple Street transformed into something between a military deployment and a family reunion. Engines rumbled, brothers clasped forearms, and the air filled with the sharp scent of gasoline and cold morning metal. Garrett stood at the intersection, watching his phone's group chat explode with arrival notifications. Bikes rolled in from every direction, north from Billings, west from Missoula, even a small convoy from Idaho that had ridden through the night. Each arrival added to the growing chorus of engines, a symphony that rattled windows and drew curious faces to doorways. By 6:15, 83 motorcycles lined both sides of Maple Street in perfect formation. Chrome gleamed under streetlights, leather vests displayed patches earned through years of loyalty, service, brotherhood. These weren't weekend warriors or costume enthusiasts. These were men who'd bled for each other, buried each other, stood together when the world pushed back. Cade approached, his face showing exhaustion from coordinating overnight arrivals. "Everyone's here." Billings brought flowers, Ezra's favorite, apparently. Wyoming Charter contacted the local diner about handling breakfast for 100 people. "We're ready." Garrett nodded, scanning the assembled brothers. He recognized faces from decades past. Rook Donnelly, who'd served in Desert Storm. Marcus Thane, a former firefighter who'd lost 3 fingers saving a child. Old Thomas, pushing 70, who'd founded the Montana Charter in 1978. Each man had answered the call without hesitation, riding through darkness to honor a boy they'd never met. Keep it tight, Garrett instructed. We move as one unit. No peeling off, no showboating. This is about Silas, not us. The Henderson house sat 3 blocks away, a modest 2-story, with faded blue siding and a small porch. Lights were on in the kitchen. Garrett could see Silas's silhouette moving behind curtains, the boy probably wondering if last night had been real or just another broken promise. Garrett walked to the porch alone, boots heavy on wooden steps. He knocked twice. Vaughn Henderson opened immediately, eyes widening as he took in the sea of motorcycles filling his street. Jesus Christ, you weren't kidding about family? Angels don't do anything halfway. Silas ready? He's been up since 5, barely slept, I think. Vaughn's voice caught slightly. Mr. Thorne, whatever happens today, thank you. We've tried everything to reach this kid. Maybe this is what he needs. Silas appeared behind Vaughn, wearing clean jeans and his father's old leather jacket, clearly too large, the sleeves bunched at his wrists. But the boy wore it like armor. His small backpack hung from one shoulder. His eyes went wide as he saw the assembled riders, mouth opening but no sound emerging. Garrett extended his hand. "Happy birthday, Silas. Your family's here." The boy descended the porch steps slowly, each footfall deliberate, as if walking through a dream he feared would shatter. Brothers nodded as he passed, some touching their patches in salute, others simply offering quiet words. "Your father was a good man." "Welcome home, son. We got you." Garrett led Silas to his Road King, where a second helmet waited, brand new, sized for a child, bearing a single patch, Ezra's son. Silas's hand trembled as he touched the helmet. "You made this? For me?" "Brothers take care of their own. That includes making sure you're protected." Garrett helped him with the straps, adjusting the fit. "You ever ridden before?" "Dad used to take me sometimes. Before." The sentence died unfinished. "Then you know the rules. Hold tight, lean with me, trust the machine. Can you do that?" Silas nodded, climbing onto the passenger seat. His small frame looked impossibly fragile against the bike's mass, but when he wrapped his arms around Garrett's waist, there was strength in that grip, the determination of someone choosing to believe again. Garrett started the engine. Around them, 82 other bikes roared to life in synchronized thunder that shook leaves from trees and set car alarms wailing. Neighbors emerged onto porches, phones raised, capturing this impossible moment. A town of 6,000, witnessing what looked like an invasion, but felt like something sacred. The convoy began moving, a river of chrome and leather flowing through Bennett's streets. Garrett led, Silas pressed against his back, and behind them rolled the full weight of brotherhood, men who'd abandoned Sunday plans, driven through darkness, and gathered at dawn, because one boy had dared to ask for family. At the intersection of Maple and Prescott, Garrett paused. The route ahead would take them through town center, past the courthouse where Silas had first approached him, out toward the open roads where Montana stretched infinite and free. But first, he wanted the boy to see what he'd called forth, to understand the magnitude of what his courage had summoned. "Look back," Garrett called over the engine's rumble. Silas turned, and the expression on his face, pure wonder mixed with disbelief, was worth every midnight phone call, every favor called in, every mile ridden in darkness. 83 motorcycles, 83 brothers, all for one orphaned boy who'd simply asked for a family who kept their word. The convoy rolled forward as the sun crested the mountains, painting everything gold. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The convoy moved through Bennett like a slow-motion thunderstorm, each engine's roar merging into a single, sustained note that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Garrett felt Silas's grip tighten around his waist as they passed the courthouse. The same steps where the boy had sat alone yesterday, holding his father's photograph like a talisman against forgetting. Route 89 stretched north toward the mountains, a 2-lane ribbon of asphalt cutting through pine forests and meadows still wet with morning dew. Garrett opened the throttle gradually, letting Silas adjust to the speed, the wind, the sense of velocity that transformed the world into a blur of green and gold. Behind them, the formation held perfect. Cade on his left flank, Rook Donnelly on his right. The rest staggered in a precise pattern that spoke of decades riding together. This wasn't chaos or recklessness. This was discipline earned through loss and forged in loyalty. 10 miles outside town, Garrett pulled off at Blackfoot Overlook, a scenic turnout where the valley opened up like a promise, revealing thousands of acres of wilderness punctuated by the distant sparkle of a river cutting through stone. He killed the engine, and gradually the thunder behind them faded to silence. Silas removed his helmet, his hair wild from wind and static, his face flushed with something that looked remarkably like joy. "How you holding up?" Garrett asked. That was... Silas struggled for words, then simply grinned, the first genuine smile Garrett had seen on the boy's face. That was everything. Brothers dismounted, stretching road-weary muscles, passing water bottles and energy bars. The Wyoming Charter's president, a lean man named Sterling Fox, approached with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Silas Brennan." Sterling's voice carried the rasp of someone who'd spent too many years breathing exhaust and cigarette smoke. "Your father rode with my cousin in Billings. Heard you turned 11 today. This belonged to Ezra. We found it when cleaning out the old clubhouse. Thought you should have it." Silas unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a worn leather journal filled with his father's handwriting, ride logs, philosophical musings, sketches of motorcycles and mountain ranges. On the first page, Ezra had written, "For Silas, when he's old enough to understand, brotherhood isn't blood, it's choice. Every day we choose to show up for each other. Every day. We choose to keep promises even when the world tells us promises don't matter. Son, I chose this life because I needed to believe in something permanent. I hope you find your own version of that faith." Tears tracked down Silas's face, but he didn't wipe them away. He clutched the journal like it was sacred text, like it was proof his father had existed, had loved him, had left behind more than just ashes and memory. "Your old man was good people," Sterling said quietly. "Solid rider, better friend. He'd be proud of you right now, taking this leap of faith, asking for what you needed instead of suffering in silence." Marcus Thane, the former firefighter, knelt beside Silas. "Kid, can I tell you something? I lost my family in a divorce 15 years ago. Hadn't seen my daughters in a decade. Thought family was something you either had or didn't, no middle ground." He gestured to the assembled brothers. "These men taught me different. Family is who shows up. Family is who rides 300 miles on 2 hours' notice because someone's son needs to know he matters. Blood's just biology. This," he pointed to his vest patches, "this is choice." Conversations unfolded across the overlook as brothers shared their own stories. Failed marriages, estranged children, parents who disowned them for choosing the road over respectability. Each story carried the same core truth. The family you find is often stronger than the family you're born into. Garrett watched Silas absorb these confessions, saw the boy's posture gradually shift from guarded to open. The armor of self-protection was cracking, letting in light and possibility. "We've got a full day planned," Garrett announced, drawing everyone's attention. "First stop is Murphy's Diner. Breakfast for everyone on the charter. After that, we're heading to Ridgeline Park for what I'm told is the largest birthday gathering this county's ever seen. Finally, sunset ride back here to Blackfoot Overlook. Sound good?" A chorus of approval rose up, engines firing back to life. But before remounting, old Thomas, the charter's founder, approached Silas with something in his weathered hands. "Young man, every angel earns his patches through action. You can't buy them, can't fake them. They're given when a brother proves his worth." Tomas held out a small cloth patch, a simple design showing 2 motorcycles side by side underneath the words, "Ezra's Legacy." "This isn't official club colors, you haven't earned that yet, but this says you're under our protection, says your family, honored and remembered." Silas took the patch with trembling hands. Where do I put it?" "Your father's jacket," Thomas said simply. "Right over your heart where it belongs." Cade produced needle and thread, because of course someone had packed sewing supplies, because brothers prepared for everything. Right there on the mountainside, as morning sun warmed the valley below, Thomas sewed the patch onto Silas's oversized jacket, while 83 men watched in reverent silence. When it was done, Silas stood taller. The jacket still didn't fit, the sleeves still bunched awkwardly, but the patch transformed it from hand-me-down to honor guard. "Mount up," Garrett called. "We've got a birthday to celebrate." The convoy rolled back onto Route 89. But this time Silas didn't just hold on. He rode with confidence, leaning into turns, trusting the machine and the man guiding it. Behind them, 82 brothers followed, each one carrying a piece of the day's unfolding promise. By the time they reached town, word had spread. Main Street was lined with people, some curious, some skeptical, some openly moved by the sight of this impossible parade. Garrett caught glimpses of townspeople pointing, phones raised, children waving. Bennett was witnessing something rare, proof that the world still contained men willing to keep promises to strangers, willing to show up for someone else's child simply because it was right. Murphy's Diner appeared ahead, its parking lot already cleared by local police who'd been briefed on the day's events. Garrett pulled in, killed the engine, and helped Silas dismount. The boy looked up at him, eyes shining. "Why are you doing this? All of you? You don't even know me." Garrett crouched to eye level, his scarred hand steady on Silas's shoulders. "Your father was one of us. That makes you one of us. And family, real family, doesn't need reasons. We just show up." Inside the diner, breakfast waited. And beyond that, a day that would become legend in Bennett's history. The day 83 bikers proved that honor still existed, that promises still mattered, and that one boy's courage could summon an army of angels from the darkness. Murphy's Diner had never held this many people. The owner, a pragmatic man named Dennis Murphy, who'd seen 40 years of Bennett's slow evolution, had opened every available space, pushing tables together into long communal rows that ran from the front windows to the kitchen door. The griddle sizzled with industrial quantities of eggs, bacon, and pancakes, while his wife, Elena, worked the coffee station like conducting a symphony. Silas sat at the head table, flanked by Garrett and Cade. His father's journal opened before him, beside a plate piled high with food he couldn't quite bring himself to eat. His eyes kept darting around the room, cataloguing details as if committing the moment to permanent memory. Brothers filled every chair, booth, and available surface. Conversations overlapped, stories being traded, laughter erupting in bursts, the easy camaraderie of men who'd shared roads and hardships and knew each other's scars without needing explanations. "Your dad ever tell you about the Yellowstone run of '92? Rook Donnelly asked, leaning across the table. 3 charters, 200 miles, and old Thomas here," he gestured to the founder, took a wrong turn that added 6 hours to the journey. Thomas snorted. "Wrong turn, hell. That was a scenic detour. You learned something about patience that day." "Learned my ass hurt after 14 hours on a softail," Rook countered, grinning. Silas listened, hungry for these fragments of his father's life. Ezra existed in these men's memories as someone real, flawed, funny, brave. Not the idealized ghost Silas had been constructing, but a human being who'd made mistakes, earned redemption, chosen his family carefully. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Bennett's residents lined the sidewalk, peering through the diner's windows, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to something approaching wonder. Sheriff Kate Brenner, no relation to Silas, though she'd taken interest in his case after the fire, stood at the entrance, arms crossed, monitoring the situation with professional wariness. Around 9:30, she entered the diner, her uniform crisp despite the Sunday morning heat already building outside. The room quieted slightly as she approached Garrett. "Mr. Thorne, I need a word." Garrett stood, gesturing toward a quieter corner near the restrooms. Silas watched them go, anxiety flickering across his face until Cade placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Relax, kid. This is just protocol. She's making sure everything's legitimate." Sheriff Brenner got straight to business. 83 motorcycles rolling into my town at dawn tends to make people nervous. I've got calls from the mayor, the town council, and about 40 concerned residents. Want to tell me what's happening here? Keeping a promise to a fallen brother's son, Garrett said simply. Boy asked for family on his birthday. I gave him what he needed. Brenner's expression softened fractionally. Silas Brennan. I know his situation. Foster care, trauma, the whole heartbreak. But Mr. Thorne, this... She gestured to the packed diner. This is unprecedented. What exactly are your plans? Breakfast here, then Ridgeline Park for a birthday gathering. I've already contacted the park service, got permits cleared. We'll be out of town by sunset. No trouble, no drama, just giving one kid a day to remember. The sheriff studied him, really looked, assessing not just his words, but the conviction behind them. Vaughn Henderson called me this morning. Said you'd made arrangements. He trusts you. That counts for something. She paused. Silas has been through hell. If you're playing games or setting him up for disappointment, I'm not. Garrett's voice carried absolute certainty. I lost my own daughter 12 years ago, leukemia. She was 11, same age as Silas is today. I made her promises I couldn't keep because cancer doesn't negotiate. This boy, he's asking for something I can deliver, and I will. Brenner's professional mask cracked slightly, revealing the human beneath. Then you have my support. I'll make sure traffic flows smoothly, keep the town calm. Just... She glanced back at Silas. Don't let him down. Kids like that have been disappointed enough for 10 lifetimes. Sheriff? Garrett's tone carried weight. The only thing I promise is that when this day ends, Silas will know beyond any doubt that family exists, that promises matter, and that his father's faith in brotherhood wasn't misplaced. As Brenner left, the room's energy shifted. Word spread quickly. The sheriff had given tacit approval, which meant the town wouldn't interfere. Suddenly, what had seemed potentially contentious transformed into something community-wide. By 10 a.m., when the convoy prepared to move to Ridgeline Park, Main Street was lined with people waving. Some held signs, Happy Birthday, Silas, and Brotherhood rides forever. Mrs. Patterson from the library stood on her porch with her husband, both of them applauding as the bikes rolled past. Even Reverend Thomas from First Baptist Church, a man who delivered stern sermons about motorcycles and moral decay, stood outside his parish, hand over his heart in respect. Garrett felt Silas's grip tighten as they navigated through this unexpected gauntlet of support. They're cheering for us? The boy's voice carried disbelief. No, son, they're cheering for you. This town has been watching you suffer for months, wanting to help but not knowing how. Today, they're seeing someone actually do something about it. That matters to people, reminds them what community means. Ridgeline Park sprawled across 15 acres of manicured grass and ancient oak trees at Bennett's northern edge. When the convoy arrived, Garrett saw that preparations had exceeded anything he'd imagined. Local businesses had donated tables, chairs, grills. The Wyoming Charter had somehow arranged for a massive birthday cake, 3 tiers, decorated with motorcycle designs, and the words, Ezra's legacy rides on. Balloons, streamers, and banners transformed the space into something between family reunion and county fair. But the most remarkable sight was the people. Bennett's residents had shown up, dozens of them, carrying covered dishes, drinks, gifts wrapped hastily, but offered genuinely. Teachers from Silas's school, nurses from the hospital, mechanics, farmers, the entire volunteer fire department. Silas dismounted, his legs unsteady, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what his simple request had unleashed. I don't understand, he whispered. Why would they all come? Old Thomas appeared beside him, placing one gnarled hand on the boy's shoulder. Because you reminded them of something they'd forgotten. That courage looks like asking for help. That vulnerability takes more strength than pretending everything's fine. Kid, you didn't just ask for family, you showed a whole town what bravery actually means. The party began not with speeches or formalities, but with Marcus Thane firing up the grills and someone's portable speaker playing classic rock that echoed across the valley. Brothers mingled with townspeople, initial wariness dissolving into genuine conversation. Garrett watched Silas move through the crowd, no longer the hollow ghost from yesterday, but something close to a real child, laughing, accepting gifts, letting strangers ruffle his hair and offer birthday wishes without flinching. This, Garrett thought, was what redemption looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but simply showing up fully, honestly, without conditions, and proving that the world still contained goodness worth believing in. The afternoon sun climbed toward its apex as Ridgeline Park transformed into something neither holy biker gathering nor traditional birthday party, but rather a hybrid that defied Bennett's usual categories. Long tables groaned under the weight of potluck contributions, casseroles, barbecue, homemade pies that spoke of recipes passed through generations. Silas sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket, surrounded by an improbable collection of gifts. Not the sterile, obligation-driven presents foster children typically received, but items chosen with genuine thought. A compass from Marcus Thane, so you never lose your way. A leather-bound notebook from Sterling Fox to write your own stories. A vintage patch collection from Old Thomas, history you can wear. But the gift that stopped everyone came from an unexpected source. Dr. Helena Voss, Bennett's only psychiatrist, and a woman known for her clinical distance, approached carrying a cardboard box that looked decades old. She was 60-something, silver-haired, and had treated half the town's trauma cases, including, briefly, Silas after the fire. "May I speak with you?" she asked, her formal tone softer than usual. Silas nodded, uncertain. Dr. Voss set the box down, opened it carefully. Inside lay a leather vest, child-sized, clearly vintage, bearing patches from various Montana charters and a name embroidered above the pocket, Iris Thorne, 1999. The world seemed to pause. Garrett, standing 20 feet away in conversation with Sheriff Brenner, went completely still. "This belonged to Garrett's daughter," Dr. Voss said quietly, her clinical demeanor cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "Iris was my patient during her final year, leukemia. She asked her father to make her a vest, wanted to be part of his world, to understand what brotherhood meant. He had it custom-made, spent months hand-sewing patches from brothers across the country." Silas touched the leather reverently, his fingers tracing the name. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because Garrett won't. He's kept it in storage for 12 years, can't bring himself to look at it, but Iris told me something before she died. Made me promise to remember it." Dr. Voss's voice wavered. She said, "Dad will blame himself forever, unless someone shows him he can still be a father. Find that person, Helena. Help him remember he's good at loving." Garrett had crossed the distance now, his face unreadable. He stared at the vest, and for a moment everyone feared he might shatter. "Helena," he said hoarsely, "you can't. I can, and I am." The psychiatrist met his eyes directly. "Garrett, you've been in mourning purgatory for over a decade. You've helped countless brothers, ridden thousands of miles, kept every promise to everyone except yourself. Iris wouldn't want her memory to be your prison." She turned back to Silas. "This vest represents everything Garrett's daughter believed about brotherhood, that it transcends blood, that family is built through choice and loyalty, that love doesn't die, it transforms. She'd want someone who understands that to carry it forward." Silas looked between the vest and Garrett, intuition telling him this moment was bigger than birthdays or gifts. "I don't want to take something that's yours. That's your daughter." Garrett knelt, really knelt, both knees in the grass, bringing himself eye level with the boy. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 12 years' silence, finally breaking. Iris would have been 23 now, would have graduated college, maybe fallen in love, probably given me hell for being an overprotective father. A tear tracked down his scarred face. "I've been carrying her memory like carrying weight, heavy, painful, proof I'd failed. But Helena's right. Iris believed in legacy, in passing forward what matters." He took the vest from Dr. Voss, held it out to Silas. "This isn't about forgetting my daughter. It's about honoring what she taught me. That being a father isn't about blood. It's about showing up. You asked for family, Silas. You asked with courage that shames every doubt I've carried. If you'll accept it, I'd be honored to be your family, not just for today, but for real. Foster care, adoption if you'll have me, whatever it takes to make sure you never sit alone on courthouse steps again." The park fell silent. 83 brothers, dozens of townspeople, all holding their breath. Silas's face crumpled, tears flowing freely now. You'd want me? For real? Son, I've been looking for someone to need me since the day Iris died. You had the courage to ask. I'm just finally brave enough to say yes. The boy launched himself forward, wrapping arms around Garrett's neck with desperate strength. The vest fell between them, and for a long moment they simply held each other, two people who'd been drowning separately, suddenly finding solid ground. When they finally separated, Garrett helped Silas into Iris's vest. It fit almost perfectly, as if somehow designed across time for this exact moment. The name Iris Thorne gleamed in the afternoon light, but Garrett reached into his pocket, produced a small patch he'd apparently been carrying all day. Silas Brennan. "We honor the past," he said, sewing the new patch beside his daughter's name, "but we build the future." Cade stepped forward first, then Marcus, then Sterling, then Thomas. One by one, 83 brothers approached, each placing a hand briefly on Silas's shoulder or vest. A silent acknowledgement of what had just transpired. This wasn't just a birthday gift. This was witness to transformation, to redemption, to the moment when grief transmuted into hope. Dr. Voss wiped her eyes, professional composure abandoned entirely. "Iris would be so proud," she whispered. Sheriff Brenner approached Garrett with paperwork she'd apparently had prepared in anticipation. "Emergency foster placement forms. I took the liberty. If you're serious about this, I can fast-track the process. Vaughn Henderson already signed off. Said he knew this morning when he saw you that Silas had found his real family." "I'm serious." Garrett accepted the papers without hesitation. "More serious than I've been about anything in 12 years. The party resumed, but everything had changed. Silas moved differently now, not as a guest at his own celebration, but as someone who'd found ground to stand on. He wore both his father's oversized jacket and Iris's perfectly fitted vest, a living bridge between past and future. As sunset approached, Garrett assembled the group for one final ride, back to Blackfoot Overlook where morning had begun, to complete the circle, to seal the promise with the day's last light. If this story has touched you, please hit the like button now. Your support helps us share more stories of courage, redemption, and the families we choose. Golden hour painted Ridgeline Park in amber and shadow as 83 engines rumbled to life, their collective thunder rolling across the valley like a promise being kept. Silas mounted behind Garrett, no longer the terrified orphan from yesterday, but someone transformed by belief, by witness, by the simple act of being claimed. The convoy formed up, but this time the route was different. Instead of returning through town, Garrett led them onto the old mining road, a rutted path that climbed through pine forests and alongside cliff faces where Montana revealed its ancient bones. This road wasn't for show. It was for feeling. The bite of wind, the lean into curves, the trust required when the path narrowed and dropped away to nothingness on one side. Silas held tighter here, not from fear, but from understanding that some experiences demanded full presence. Behind them, the formation stretched like a steel serpent winding through wilderness. Brothers rode not as individuals, but as a single organism, each motorcycle's position part of a larger choreography perfected through decades. This was what Ezra had tried to explain to a much younger Silas, that brotherhood was both individual and collective, singular and plural, separate and unified. Halfway up the mountain, Garrett pulled off at a scenic overlook few people knew existed. A narrow outcrop of rock jutted over a valley where shadows pooled like dark water and distant peaks caught the dying sun like torches. The convoy stopped, engines died. In the sudden silence, the world revealed itself, wind through pine needles, the distant cry of a hawk, the soft rustle of leather as men dismounted and gathered. Cade produced a small package wrapped in black cloth. "Silas, there's one more tradition we need to honor." Inside the cloth lay a set of challenge coins, custom-made tokens bearing various charter emblems, each one stamped with dates and initials representing brothers who'd passed. Garrett's hands trembled slightly as he accepted one particular coin, silver with a black border, bearing Ezra's name and the date of the fire. Your father earned this when he completed his first cross-country ride with the Billings Charter in '93, Garrett explained. It was given to the club for safekeeping when he retired to start a family. We never thought we'd find occasion to pass it along, but he placed it in Silas's palm. It belongs to you now. Ezra's legacy carried forward. Silas studied the coin. Its weight somehow heavier than metal should be. On one side, a motorcycle beneath a full moon. On the reverse, a single word, etched deep. Fidelity. I don't know how to be what he was, Silas said quietly. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Old Thomas stepped forward, his weathered face catching sunset light. Son, courage isn't absence of fear. It's choosing action despite terror. You walked up to Garrett yesterday, not knowing if he'd laugh, ignore you, or send you away. That took more guts than any road I've ever ridden. Your father's legacy isn't about motorcycles or leather vests, Sterling Fox added. It's about integrity, about keeping your word when the world tells you promises are negotiable. You've already demonstrated that by showing up, by asking honestly, by trusting strangers to be decent. Marcus Thane, the firefighter, knelt beside Silas. I want to tell you something about family, kid. For years, I thought I'd failed mine. Divorce, estrangement, years of silence. Then these brothers taught me that family isn't something you inherit or lose. It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice. Today, you built something remarkable. You called an army out of darkness with nothing but honest need. That's power most people never access. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding crimson and gold across the sky. Garrett gestured for everyone to face west, toward the dying light. There's an old tradition, he said, his voice carrying across the overlook. When a brother falls, we ride at sunset to honor the journey from light into darkness, not as an ending, but as transformation. Ezra Brennan transformed from rider to father, from brother to family man. Then fire transformed him again into memory and legacy. Today, we're witnessing another transformation, grief into purpose, loss into family, promise into reality. One by one, brothers reached into pockets and vests, producing their own challenge coins, photographs, small mementos of fallen friends. They placed them on the rock outcrop, building a small cairn of memory, Ezra's coin at the center, surrounded by tokens representing decades of brotherhood, loss, and endurance. Silas added something unexpected, a small toy motorcycle his father had given him years ago, plastic and faded, but carried through every foster home, every displacement, every moment when hope seemed impossible. For you, Dad, Silas whispered. I found them. The family you told me about, they're real. The moment stretched, sacred and impossible to quantify. Then Garrett raised his right hand, fist clenched, the signal. 83 brothers mirrored the gesture, fists raised toward the darkening sky. To Ezra Brennan, Garrett called. Brother, father, friend, your son stands among us now, protected and claimed. Your promise lives on. To Ezra, 83 voices responded, the sound echoing across the valley like thunder that refused to fade. As darkness gathered, brothers began starting engines, preparing for the descent back to town. But Garrett held Silas back for one private moment. Tomorrow, we start the paperwork. Emergency foster placement first, then full adoption if that's what you want. I won't lie and say it'll be easy. I work odd hours, travel for club business. My house needs repairs. But I promise you'll never sit alone on courthouse steps again. I promise you'll always have someone to call. I promise that when you're scared or hurting or just need to be heard, I'll show up. That's what fathers do, real ones, chosen ones. Silas's voice came small but certain. What do I call you? Garrett considered. What feels right? Garrett feels weird. Dad feels. I don't know if I can say that yet without thinking of my real dad. Then don't. There's no timeline on grief or love. Call me what fits. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Thorn? Silas tested the word. That work? Thorn works fine. Sounds like respect, which is a good foundation. They mounted the bike, Silas fitting himself against Garrett's back with the easy confidence of repetition. The convoy reformed, headlights cutting through gathering darkness as they descended toward Bennett. But something had shifted. This wasn't just a birthday ride anymore. This was transportation toward permanence, toward the life Silas would wake to tomorrow and every day after, imperfect, complicated, but fundamentally his. As they reached town, Garrett noticed something remarkable. Porch lights were on. Not just a few, but dozens. The entire route lined with illuminated homes. People standing outside to watch the convoy return. Bennett witnessing the completion of a promise, the town's silent approval of this unconventional family forming within their midst. Vaughn Henderson stood outside his house with his wife, both waving as Garrett pulled up. There were no tears this time, only understanding. Silas was leaving their care, but not because they'd failed. He was leaving because he'd found something they couldn't provide. A father who understood loss deeply enough to build hope from its ashes. "You take care of him," Vaughn said simply. "Every day for the rest of my life," Garrett replied. The convoy dispersed gradually, brothers peeling off toward homes spread across 4 states. Long rides awaited, some facing 8 hours of darkness to return to their own families, their own lives. But none of them would forget this day, this boy, this proof that the code they lived by still mattered in a world increasingly dismissive of honor. By midnight, only Garrett and Silas remained, sitting on the porch of Garrett's small house on the edge of town. The night was vast and star-filled, and somewhere in the darkness, the promise of tomorrow waited. "Thorn?" Silas's voice was drowsy, the exhaustion of emotion finally catching up. "Yeah? Thank you. For saying yes when you didn't have to." Garrett pulled the boy closer, felt the trust in that small frame. "Thank you for asking, for reminding me I could still be someone's hero." Inside, the house waited, spare, masculine, marked by 12 years of deliberate emptiness. But starting tomorrow, it would transform. A second bedroom would be cleared, painted, filled with a child's belongings. Meals would become shared rather than solitary. Silence would give way to conversation, laughter, the ordinary chaos of living with someone who needed you. Garrett thought of Iris, wondered if somehow she'd orchestrated this from whatever place souls occupied after death. Wondered if his daughter had looked at the universe and said, "Send him someone to save so he remembers how to live." Whether metaphysics or coincidence, the result was the same. Redemption arrived not as grand revelation, but as one scared boy standing in a diner, asking for the impossible. And 83 angels answering yes. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Garrett woke at 5:30, momentarily disoriented by the sounds of another person in his house. Water running, cabinet doors closing, the small symphony of cohabitation he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Silas appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing yesterday's clothes, his hair sleep wild, clutching his father's journal like a security blanket. What do I... Breakfast first. Scrambled eggs, okay?" The boy nodded, sliding into a chair at the small table where Garrett had eaten alone for 12 years. The domesticity felt foreign and necessary simultaneously, 2 people learning to occupy space together, negotiating routines, establishing the small rituals that transform cohabitation into family. Over eggs and toast, Garrett outlined the immediate future. "School today. I called Principal Morrison yesterday, explained the situation. She's expecting you at 8:15. After school, we've got an appointment with Dr. Voss for what she's calling a transition assessment. Wednesday, Social Services comes to inspect the house. Friday, first court hearing for emergency custody. Sounds like a lot of official stuff. That's because it is. Adopting someone isn't casual. The system wants to make sure I'm not a serial killer or secretly running a drug operation from my garage." Silas cracked a small smile. "Are you?" "Jury's still out on the garage thing." Garrett deadpanned, earning a genuine laugh. The ride to Bennett Middle School drew stares. Garrett's Road King was unmistakable, and by now the entire town knew about Sunday's gathering. Students clustered by the entrance, whispering, pointing. Silas tensed, old anxieties resurfacing. "You want me to walk you in?" "No, I should. I need to do this myself." "Fair. But Silas..." Garrett waited until the boy met his eyes. "You're not alone anymore. Anyone gives you trouble, you've got 83 brothers who'll have opinions about that." The day unfolded in bureaucratic surrealism. Garrett fielded calls from social workers, signed preliminary documents, met with a family court attorney who specialized in non-traditional adoptions. The legal architecture of becoming a father, when nature hadn't provided the relationship, was Byzantine and exhausting. At 2:45, he picked Silas up from school. The boy climbed onto the bike silently, and they were halfway home before Garrett noticed the tension in his grip. "What happened?" "Nothing, just people asking questions, lots of questions." Garrett pulled over, killed the engine. "Good questions or invasive ones?" "Both. Like some kids thought it was cool, the whole biker thing, but others were weird about it. Asked if you were dangerous, if I was joining a gang, if—" Silas's voice dropped. "If you were keeping me because you needed something from me." Rage flared hot in Garrett's chest, but he forced it down. "What did you tell them?" "That you're my family, that I chose this. But it's hard when they look at me like I'm either really lucky or really stupid." "Here's the truth, Silas. People fear what they don't understand. They see leather vests and motorcycles and assume the worst because Hollywood told them to. They can't conceive that brotherhood might actually mean something, that promises can be kept without ulterior motives." Garrett turned to face him directly. "You know what matters, what you believe. Do you feel safe with me?" "Yes." "Do you think I'm keeping you for some hidden reason?" "No. You're keeping me because you understand what it's like to lose someone you love." "Exactly. So let them whisper. Let them judge. We know the truth. And that's enough." Wednesday's home inspection proved anticlimactic. The social worker, a tired woman named Patricia Chen, who'd seen every possible family configuration, walked through Garrett's house with professional detachment, noting the clean kitchen, the second bedroom already being converted for Silas, the lack of obvious hazards. "Mr. Thorne, I'll be honest, I've handled hundreds of these cases. Usually, emergency placements involve relatives, family, friends, people with existing connections. This situation is unusual." "But legitimate," Garrett countered. "I knew the boy's father. I have resources, stability, and most importantly, genuine commitment to his well-being. I don't doubt your sincerity. But the court will ask hard questions. Why you? Why now? What makes you qualified to parent a traumatized 11-year-old? Garrett led her to the living room, where photos now lined the mantel, new additions to a space that had been deliberately barren for years. Iris as a child, Iris in her custom vest, Iris laughing at some forgotten joke. And now, beside those frozen moments, a new photo. Silas at Ridgeline Park, surrounded by 83 brothers, wearing both his father's jacket and Iris's vest, his face radiant with belonging. "I'm qualified," Garrett said quietly, "because I know what it costs to lose family. I know the specific emptiness Silas carries, because I carry the same weight. And I know, not think, but know, that sometimes the universe offers second chances, disguised as impossible requests from brave children." Patricia studied the photos for a long moment. When she turned back, her professional mask had cracked slightly. "I'll recommend approval for the emergency placement. Full adoption will take months and require counseling, home visits, the works. But Mr. Thorne, that boy in the photo looks happier than in any previous welfare check we've conducted. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Friday's court hearing lasted 17 minutes. Judge Margaret Hollis, a stern woman who'd presided over Bennett's family court for 23 years, reviewed the paperwork with methodical precision. She asked Silas directly if he understood what was happening, if he felt coerced, if he wanted this arrangement. "I want this," Silas said clearly. "I asked for it. Garrett Thorne. He's the first person who actually showed up when I needed someone. He didn't just say nice words or feel sorry for me. He brought 83 people to prove that family still exists." Judge Hollis's expression softened fractionally. "Emergency placement approved for 6 months, with regular reviews. Mr. Thorne, you'll meet with social services monthly. Silas will continue therapy with Dr. Voss. Any violations of the placement terms, and we revisit this arrangement immediately. Understood?" "Understood, Your Honor." That evening, Garrett and Silas sat on the porch, watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. A week had passed since the boy's impossible request, and the world had fundamentally shifted, not through magic or divine intervention, but through the simple accumulation of kept promises. "Thorn?" Silas's voice carried a question he'd clearly been rehearsing. "What happens if you change your mind? Like 6 months from now, what if you decide this was a mistake?" Garrett set down his beer, turned to face the boy fully. "Silas, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it completely. I don't make temporary commitments. When I agreed to be your family, that wasn't contingent on trial periods or provisional arrangements. The court requires oversight because they need to protect you. That's their job. But from my side, you're mine now, permanently. The only way you're leaving this house is if you grow up and choose to, and even then, you're still mine. That's how family works. But what if I screw up? What if I'm difficult or angry, or then you'll be a normal kid going through normal things? Silas, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not trying to replace your father or recreate my daughter. I'm building something new with you, messy, imperfect, real. There will be fights and misunderstandings and days when we drive each other crazy. That's called living together. It doesn't change the fundamental commitment." Silas absorbed this silently, then, "Can I ask you something about Iris?" The question should have hurt, but somehow it didn't. "Anything. Do you think she'd be okay with this, with me?" Garrett pulled Silas closer, one arm around the boy's shoulders. "I think Iris would be thrilled. She always wanted a sibling, used to beg her mother and me for a little brother. We couldn't make that happen before she got sick, but—" He gestured to the space between them. "Maybe this is her way of getting what she wanted. You're not replacing her, Silas. You're extending her legacy." The week ended with a call from Cade. "Chapter's planning a ride next month. Yellowstone Loop 4 days. Thought you and the kid might want to join. Nothing crazy, just brothers on the road." "I'll ask him," Garrett said, glancing at Silas. "But Cade, thanks for everything. For showing up, for making calls, for helping me remember who I used to be." "That's what brothers do, Thorn. We show up." As darkness settled over Bennett, Garrett and Silas remained on the porch, two people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances, building something fragile and precious. A family forged not from blood, but from choice, courage, and the radical belief that some promises still held weight in a cynical world. Tomorrow would bring school, therapy appointments, the mundane architecture of daily life. But tonight they simply existed, father and son in spirit if not yet legally, bound by mutual need and the witnessed commitment of 83 angels who'd ridden through darkness to prove that redemption was real. April arrived in Montana with the violence of renewal, snowmelt rushing through creeks, wildflowers exploding across meadows, the land remembering how to be green again. 6 months had passed since Silas's 11th birthday, 6 months of accumulated ordinary moments that had slowly transformed emergency placement into something that felt permanent. Garrett stood in the doorway of Silas's room, no longer the spare bedroom, but genuinely his, decorated with posters of motorcycles, shelves filled with books, a desk where homework battles were fought and won. The boy sat cross-legged on his bed, Ezra's journal open across his lap, adding his own entries in handwriting that was gradually becoming more confident. "Ready for today?" Garrett asked. Silas looked up, and the difference was remarkable. The hollow-eyed ghost from 6 months ago had been replaced by an almost 12-year-old with color in his cheeks, easy laughter, and the casual confidence of someone who knew they belonged somewhere. "Yeah. Nervous, but ready." Today was the final adoption hearing, the moment when legal formality would catch up to emotional reality. Judge Hollis would review 6 months of social worker reports, therapy assessments, school records, and witness testimonies before making her determination. The courthouse steps, where Silas had once sat alone, now felt different. Not a place of abandonment, but of transformation. As they climbed toward the entrance, Garrett noticed a familiar sight, motorcycles. Not 83 this time, but a dozen, Cade, Marcus, Sterling, Old Thomas, and others who'd taken personal days to witness this conclusion. Inside, the courtroom was surprisingly full. Dr. Voss sat in the front row beside Patricia Chen, the social worker. Vaughn and Rita Henderson, Silas's former foster parents, occupied seats near the back. Even Sheriff Brenner had shown up in uniform but off-duty, her presence a quiet statement of support. Judge Hollis entered, and the room rose. She'd aged in 6 months, or perhaps Garrett was simply noticing details he'd missed during the emergency hearing, the way her eyes carried both weariness and determination, the sense that she'd seen too much hardship but refused to surrender to cynicism. Case number 2025 FC 187, in the matter of the adoption petition of Garrett Samuel Thorne seeking to adopt Silas Ezra Brennan. Her voice carried ritual formality. Mr. Thorne, please approach with the minor child. They stood before the bench together, Silas wearing the vest that bore both Iris's name and his own, the garment that had become his armor and identity. Mr. Thorne, I've reviewed the reports. 6 months of consistent care, regular therapy attendance, improved academic performance from Silas. Positive assessments from every professional involved. Ms. Chen, your recommendation. Patricia Chen stood. Your Honor, I've conducted monthly home visits. Mr. Thorne has exceeded every requirement. More importantly, the transformation in Silas has been remarkable. From a traumatized child cycling through foster placements to a thriving young person with stability, support, and genuine family connection, I recommend full approval. Dr. Voss, the psychiatrist rose, her clinical voice softer than usual. Your Honor, I've worked with both Garrett and Silas individually and together. What I've observed is authentic healing, 2 people who understand loss, helping each other remember how to hope. Silas has processed his trauma remarkably well, largely because he finally has the emotional safety to do so. This adoption isn't just legally sound, it's therapeutically essential. Judge Hollis turned her attention to Silas directly. Young man, you're old enough to have a voice in this proceeding. Do you want Garrett Thorne to adopt you, to become your legal father? Silas straightened, his voice clear and certain. Yes, Your Honor, more than anything. Why? Help me understand what makes this arrangement right. Because he keeps his word. Because when I was sitting alone thinking nobody cared, he showed up with 83 people to prove me wrong. Because he lets me be sad about my parents without trying to make me forget them. Because he tells me about his daughter, so I know I'm not replacing her, just adding to the family. Because... Silas's voice wavered but held. Because he chose me, and I choose him back. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Hollis removed her glasses, set them aside, and for a moment her judicial mask slipped entirely. Mr. Thorne, I've presided over thousands of adoption cases. Most involve relatives, step-parents, people with existing legal or biological connections. What you've done is rarer, chosen family in the truest sense. The law is designed to protect children, to ensure their well-being isn't sacrificed to adult whims or good intentions that fade. But the law is also meant to recognize when real family exists, regardless of how unconventionally it forms. She lifted her gavel, and Garrett felt time compress. 6 months of mundane miracles, thousands of ordinary moments that had accumulated into something extraordinary. Petition granted. As of this moment, Silas Ezra Brennan is legally adopted by Garrett Samuel Thorne. All rights, responsibilities, and privileges of parenthood are hereby conferred. Young man, you have a father. Mr. Thorne, you have a son. May you both honor this bond with the same courage you've demonstrated in creating it. The gavel fell, and the world shifted. Applause erupted, not polite courthouse clapping, but genuine celebration. Brothers stood, whistling and cheering. Dr. Voss wiped tears openly. Even Judge Hollis smiled, a rare expression that transformed her stern face into something almost gentle. Silas turned to Garrett, and for the first time, said the word that had been waiting 6 months to be spoken. Dad! Garrett pulled him close, feeling the weight and wonder of that single syllable. Son. Outside the courthouse, the spring sun blazed brilliant and warm. The dozen bikes lined up, their chrome catching light like promises made visible. But before anyone could mount up, Sheriff Brenner approached with something unexpected, a document bearing official seals. Mr. Thorne, or should I say Mr. Brennan Thorne, since that's what Silas requested. The town council met last week. They wanted me to present this. Garrett opened the document, read, then read again. Proclamation honoring the Hells Angels Montana Charter for demonstrating community values of loyalty, service, and family. Furthermore, designating April 15th as Brotherhood Day in Bennett, Montana, commemorating the day Silas Brennan found family and reminded this town what courage looks like. Old Thomas laughed, his weathered face splitting into a grin. Well, damn. Took us 50 years, but we finally got official approval. It's more than that, Sheriff Brenner said. The council is establishing a mentorship program, pairing at-risk kids with club members willing to serve as guides, voluntary obviously, and with proper oversight. But the idea is that what you did for Silas shouldn't be unique. It should be replicable. Sterling Fox stepped forward. Sheriff, I think I speak for the chapter when I say we'd be honored. Brotherhood isn't just about us. It's about extending what we've learned to anyone who needs it. The ride that followed wasn't to Blackfoot Overlook or Ridgeline Park, but somewhere new, a property Garrett had purchased 2 weeks prior, intending it as a surprise. 15 acres of open land bordered by forest, a small cabin requiring renovation, and endless potential. What is this place? Silas asked as they dismounted. Our place. Thought we needed space, room for you to grow, for the chapter to gather, for building something permanent. Figured we could fix up the cabin together, make it ours. Silas walked the property, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, to something approaching awe. You bought this? For us? For us. For the future. For having a place where you can bring friends, where brothers can visit, where we build memories that aren't borrowed or temporary. Cade began unpacking tools from his saddlebags. Apparently, this surprise had been coordinated. Within an hour, a dozen brothers were assessing the cabin's structure, planning repairs, arguing good-naturedly about whether to prioritize the roof or the plumbing. Marcus pulled Garrett aside. You know what you've done, right? You've given the rest of us a blueprint, shown us that we're not just riders or rebels or whatever label society applies. We're men capable of building family, of keeping faith, of making the world marginally less broken. I just said yes to a kid who asked a question. No. You said yes when the world conditions us to say no. You showed up when everyone else looked away. That's heroism, brother. The quiet kind that doesn't get movies or medals, but changes lives anyway. As sunset approached, the group gathered around a small fire someone had built in a makeshift pit. Stories circulated, old rides, fallen brothers, moments of grace discovered in unlikely places. Silas sat beside Garrett, absorbing these narratives, understanding that he'd become part of something ancient and ongoing. Dad? The word still felt new in Silas's mouth, unfamiliar but increasingly right. What happens now? Now, we live. We build this place together. You finish school, maybe learn to ride someday if that interests you. We have arguments about curfews and homework. We celebrate birthdays and holidays. We mess up and figure out how to apologize. We do all the ordinary, frustrating, beautiful things families do. Sounds perfect. Sounds real, Garrett corrected. Perfect is boring. Real is what matters. As darkness gathered and the fire burned down to embers, brothers began the journey home, back to their own families, their own lives, carrying with them the knowledge that sometimes the brotherhood required more than riding together. Sometimes it required showing up, fully and honestly, to prove that ancient codes about loyalty and honor still held meaning. Garrett and Silas were the last to leave, standing beside the Road King as stars emerged overhead. Montana spread vast and infinite around them, full of possibility and promise. You think Iris would be happy? Silas asked quietly. That you found me, that we're building this. Garrett looked up at the stars, searching for something, permission, blessing, or simply the right words. I think Iris is why I was ready when you asked. She taught me that love doesn't die, it transforms. That family isn't about biology, it's about showing up. That promises matter most when keeping them costs something. And my real dad? I think Ezra is wherever fathers go when they can no longer protect their children, watching, hoping, trusting that someone will step in. You honored him by having the courage to ask for help. I'm honoring him by saying yes. That's how we keep them alive, by living the lessons they taught us. They mounted the bike, and as the engine rumbled to life, Silas held tight, not from fear or uncertainty, but from the simple security of knowing someone was there, would remain there, had chosen to be there permanently. The road home wound through darkness, headlight carving a path forward. Behind them, the property waited, future project, future home, future memories yet to be built. But tonight, the present was enough. Father and son, riding together, carrying forward the legacy of promises kept and families chosen. In Bennett, porch lights would already be glowing, waiting to welcome them home. Tomorrow would bring school, work, the mundane architecture of daily existence. But tonight belonged to the ride, to the simple miracle of choosing each other, to the radical act of believing that redemption could arrive on two wheels, carrying thunder and hope in equal measure. As they crested the final hill before town, Garrett whispered into the wind, knowing Silas couldn't hear but saying it anyway. "Thank you for being brave enough to ask, for giving me a reason to be brave enough to answer." And somewhere in the vastness, whether in memory, spirit, or the collective consciousness of those who'd loved them, Iris and Ezra smiled, watching their legacies ride forward together into an uncertain but no longer lonely future. The road stretched on, the promise held, the family endured. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If these stories of courage and redemption move you, please subscribe to our channel and share this with someone who needs to remember that family is built through choice, loyalty, and the simple act of showing up. Until the next ride, keep your word, honor your people, and never stop believing that some promises are worth keeping forever. The end.